Hey everyone, this is Turd Flinging Monkey, and this is going to be kind of a pseudo response to Coltane's video, which was a response to my video, so on and so forth. I want to switch gears with the conversation. I don't want this to be a back and forth where we're constantly responding to responses from other people's responses, and it turns into like 6 degrees of responses. We got to keep going in like Inception. You got to go like one level deeper into the responses. So let's switch gears. Let's talk about the issue from a different angle. So I'm going to talk about this issue from the perspective, instead of patriarchy and authority of men over women, I want to talk about parental authority over children. So we're going to do a little dive into the 1980s. We're going to turn to the land of synthesizers and Muppets and Saturday morning cartoons and arcades. I'm going to get all Stranger Things up in this bitch. So the first article we're going to talk about is from the Washington Post. This is a 2015 article called How the Daycare Child Abuse Hysteria of the 1980s Became a Witch Hunt. Written by Moira Casey, July 31st, 2015. And about halfway down the article, it reads, quote, and I want you just to kind of just absorb this. Let this wash over you. Let me know if this sounds in any way familiar. It says, quote, "We believe the children" became both the unofficial motto of the advocates for the prosecution and a catch-all response to those few who asked whether the accusers had completely lost their minds. The approach was based largely on the work of psychiatrist Roland Summit, who claimed that of every 1,000 children who say they were sexually abused, only 2 or 3 are guilty of inventing or exaggerating. He also said it was normal for children who had been sexually abused to retract their claims and say they made it all up. The upshot, no matter what children said, they were sexually abused. And if you didn't believe them, something was wrong with you. Yet, believing the children glossed over the fact that often adults believed only what they wanted to hear. In the McMartin case, the social workers who interviewed children not only considered Summit's theory as gospel, but interrogated, not too strong a word, the children repeatedly, becoming more bullying with each session. When one child denied seeing a game called Naked Movie Star played at his preschool, the therapist replied, "Well, what good are you? You must be dumb." Police were often no better. In one instance, when a child said, "I don't know," to a question about sexual games, the policeman said, "Did he take your underpants off? Can you say yes? Say yes." As a Minneapolis Star-Tribune story later reported, therapists acted like cops and cops acted like therapists. Social workers went along on a search warrant party. Predictably, many children subjected to repeat interviews confessed that the abuse happened. The McMartin case wasn't the only example of such trauma inflicted on children. In Scott County, Minnesota, where 22 people were arrested on sexual abuse allegations, an 11-year-old boy was removed from his home after his parents became the target of allegations. He was interrogated on an almost daily basis for 2 months. Finally, he gave in and said that his parents had participated in orgies. Quote, "I was sick of being badgered," he later explained. Another boy, after being interviewed 74 times, had a breakdown. Journalists began to question this around 1990. It helped that a jury found the McMartin defendants not guilty on 52 counts and deadlocked on 13 others. But from time to time, the panic would resurface. In the mid-90s, in Wenatchee, Washington, a police lieutenant became convicted on the existence of a child sex ring in a small city of 22,000 and eventually filed more than 29,000 counts of child sex abuse against 43 people, resulting in 18 convictions. Nearly all the convictions were set aside by the end of the decade. At the end of the article it reads, "Some have drawn parallels between the Salem witch trials of 1692 and the false accusations of sexual abuse that swept across America in the 1980s. The difference is this. Those falsely accused in Salem got public apologies from their accusers and reparations. No such luck for the dozens of daycare workers and others who were falsely accused and imprisoned in modern-day America. We should be ashamed." And that article was from 2015, and it's worth pointing out that the McMartin case, the case that started this whole epidemic across America of child sex abuse and children turning in their parents and everyone being suspected of being a pedophile, that started in California. The McMartin case was in Los Angeles County. Our next article comes from The Cut. This is from Jesse Singal, How the Self-Esteem Craze Took Over America and Why the Hype Was Irresistible. The beginning of the article reads, in 1991, a children's book called The Lovables in the Kingdom of Self-Esteem was published. Written by Diane Lumans and illustrated by Kim Howard, The Lovables imparts a simple, nurturing message. You, the tiny child reading this book or having this book read to you, are very special. The inside copy reads as follows: I am lovable, I am lovable, I am lovable. By using these magical words, the gates of the kingdom of self-esteem swing open for readers of all ages. Inside the kingdom live 24 animals, the Lovables, each one with a special gift to contribute. Mona Monkey is lovable, Owen Owl is capable, Buddy Beaver takes care of the world around him, Greta Goat trusts herself. It seems mawkish now, but by the standards of children's books, but The Lovables was published as a runaway cultural trend was cresting across North America. The self-esteem craze. If you grew up or raised a child during the 1980s or 1990s, you almost certainly remember this sort of material, as well as goofy classroom exercises focus on how special each individual child was. A certain ethos took hold during this time. It was the job of schools to educate, yes, but also to instill in children a sense of their own specialness and potential. A few paragraphs down it reads, quote, at root, this natural obsession was mostly the work of a very eccentric politician, John Vasconcellos. Vasconcellos, who died in 2014, was a California state legislator for 38 years. A few paragraphs down, it reads, this was a career-defining find for Vasconcellos. The logic was simple. If low self-esteem is tied to so many maladaptive responses, to so many forms of underachievement and bad behavior, then surely raising kids and others' self-esteem could bring with it untold benefits. Soon, Vasconcellos was lobbying Sacramento to launch a statewide self-esteem commission to study the public policy implications of self-esteem. And after a number of false starts and near misses, he got his commission. In 1986, California passed, and the governor signed legislation created the California Task Force to promote self-esteem and personal and social responsibility. The task force goals was to explore how to apply self-esteem to a range of social problems, and the state budgeted the group $245,000 per year. Naturally, it was headed by Vasconcellos. A few paragraphs down, it reads, quote, in 1989, the task force released its flagship publication, the book, The Social Importance of Self-Esteem. This, too, was underwhelming, according to Baumeister. Boy, this did not find very much, he said. He also simply couldn't find any research supporting some of Vasconcellos' most exciting promises about the power of self-esteem, such as its ostensible potential for reducing violence. It seemed that this idea had gotten somehow started by accident, he said. I could never track down any original statement or source or data suggesting low self-esteem caused aggression. The media saw things differently. While the initial wave of skepticism did receive plenty of media coverage, the Doonesbury strips were mentioned endlessly, subsequent reporting on the self-esteem movement tended to take on a fairly credulous tone. Rarely was there much pushback to the glowing anecdotes and the endless unchallenged quotes from confident but confused experts about the importance of self-esteem. Quote, I've read hundreds of files on criminals, Deputy Attorney General Brian Togger told the United Press International journalist. Some people end up in a life of serious crime simply because they dislike themselves. Here and elsewhere, correlation and causation were endlessly confused. That is, of course it shouldn't be surprising if many criminals have low self-esteem. That's because people who are criminals tend to have a lot of bad stuff going on with their lives. It doesn't prove self-esteem caused their criminality, or that had someone bolstered their self-esteem at a young age, they wouldn't have ended up committing crimes anyway. A few paragraphs down it reads, as it turned out, there was very little validity to the causal claims everyone was making about self-esteem in the 80s and 90s. We know that because around the turn of the century, long after self-esteem programs had blossomed all over North America, the psychological establishment decided to take a more critical look at the dogma surrounding the subject. Baumeister and 3 other researchers were invited by the American Psychology Society to conduct a comprehensive review of the literature to find out whether self-esteem really works as advertised. In a 2005 article in Scientific American and more technical paper published in Psychological Science in the Public Interest, they delivered the bad news. There was little published evidence supporting Vasconcellos' ideas. In some areas, high self-esteem actually correlated with worse behavior. Some criminals, it turns out, actually view themselves quite favorably. In other areas, it turned out that correlation did not imply causation, just as Baumeister suspected. Take a 1986 study his team reviewed which found that self-esteem in 10th grade is only weakly predictive of academic achievement in 12th grade. For example, academic achievement, on the other hand, did predict higher self-esteem. It's more likely that successful people with high self-esteem have high self-esteem because they're successful than vice versa. Our next article is from NPR, and it's called Whatever Happened to the Campaign to Ban Spanking? And this one's from this year, September 3rd, 2019. I just want to point out that a bunch of countries have banned spanking, 56 in total, with France and Kosovo bringing the most recent additions. They make a point to bring up that the Philippines vetoed a spanking ban. It says that yet on February 28th, President Rodrigo Duterte vetoed it. Among other reasons, he stated, quote, "This bill would allow government to extend its reach into the privacy of the family, authorizing measures aimed at suppressing corporal punishment, regardless of how carefully it is practiced. In doing so, this bill transgresses the proper boundaries of state intervention in the life of the family, the sanctity and autonomy of which is recognized by the Constitution." I just want to point that out. It's also worth noting that all of these problems seem to originate in California. I'm just saying. As far as the spanking ban, yeah, definitely California. But I'm glad to see the Philippines vetoed it. But notice that the reason why it was vetoed was because it infringes on the sanctity of the family. It undermines parental authority over their children. It puts the government in a place where the parents should be. So let's move on to our last article we're going to cover. This is from bostonmagazine.com, June 30th, 2015, called Spoiled Rotten. We're lavishing our kids with unwarranted praise, trying to be their BFFs instead of their parents and giving them anything they ask for. Where have we gone wrong? About halfway down the article it reads, "There's a teenager who roars down our street in a bright yellow Audi. I asked my neighbor, who buys their teenage son a brand new sports car? She gave it to me straight. Dumb parents. She has a point, but really, what drives people to make poor parenting decisions? I have a theory. They want their kids to like them. That has to be the reason parents these days allow their middle schoolers to stay up past midnight to watch The Tonight Show, or let their teenagers host unsupervised gatherings at their homes, or why they remain silent while their kids badmouth their teachers. The trouble is, we're sending mixed messages to our kids. Are we their moms and dads or their BFFs? Weisbord calls it a big social experiment. Clearly, it's important for us to be close to our children. 51% of us say we spend more time with our kids than our parents did with us. According to a fall 2014 NBC News parenting poll, we want our kids to feel comfortable telling us anything, without fear of judgment or reprisal. But as a result, we've lost some of our authority and the confidence that supports effective parenting, Bloomfield says. Here's the real problem with it, adds Weisbord, quote, "Kids appropriate their parents' values by trying to be like them. If we are too close to our children," he says, "it can make it hard for our kids to idealize us, in part because we are too busy idealizing them. Maybe we're trying to relive our glory years through our children, or to parent them the way we wish our parents had parented us, or to reconcile our guilt for working long hours, or dragging them through a painful divorce. Whatever the reason, we're blurring the lines." Weisbord isn't suggesting return to the more distant relationship of our grandparents' generation, but he says we need to figure out a way to be more involved in our children's lives while still promoting their moral growth. In the end, you have to make decisions as a parent, not as a friend, he adds. The good news, kids from homes where clear expectations and limits live in balance with nurturing respect tend to be livelier, happier, more emotionally self-regulated, resilient, socially adept, and flexible than kids from either permissive or authoritarian homes, Bluefield asserts. Anyway, alright, that's the last article we're going to cover. My point is, you can see a lot of parallels between feminism and the self-esteem movement, between Me Too and the 1980s witch trials of these daycare workers who were being falsely accused of molesting children, of spoiled children, and of modern women. There are extreme, obvious parallels. Now, what is the solution? It's worth pointing out that children don't vote. So clearly, these problems are not going to be fixed by taking children's voting rights away. So here is the million-dollar question. What is the solution to this problem? Again, the problem being you have spanking bans, lack of parental authority. You have children calling CPS and doing witch hunts against daycare workers and parents. You have parents spoiling their kids. So what's the solution? Is the solution A, get rid of technology? Now let's explore that. Before we just dismiss it, let's explore getting rid of technology. In the last article I read about Spoiled Rotten, the anecdote is made that giving children all these things, computers, airlines, basically taking away the quote-unquote character-building events of life, having everything being so easy for them, does make them jaded and unappreciative. There is something to be said that without all this technology, maybe children wouldn't be the, unbearable little shits that they are today. Maybe if they had to work for things instead of have everything given to them, they would be more appreciative. There is merit to this argument that technology does exacerbate the problem. But would getting rid of technology solve the problem? I don't necessarily think so. I mean, we have parents who grew up in the 80s and 90s when these problems were still happening. Perhaps they've gotten worse with technology, but they weren't the cause of the problem. And it's worth pointing out that the dad who gave the example of his drive to Florida as a kid and all the memories he had, comparing it to a flight to Florida with his kids that took a couple hours, how it was robbing his children of this story that could be happening, that his children would take with them and carry with them. He even admits it's his problem. He needs to be a better parent. It's not the technology, it's the parents. He even admits that. Even the parents who realize that had this technology not existed, maybe their kids would have more memories with their families. Even they admit that the problem is ultimately their fault. All right, let's go number 2. I'm only throwing this in there just to point out how stupid it sounds. Is the solution racism in Jesus? Would these families going to church have any effect? No, I completely dismiss that. The problem with this dynamic is not a lack of religiosity. It is not a lack of racism. It's not like the immigrants didn't cause the problem. This is simply a problem of parental authority. So the solution, the actual solution, is parental authority. Period. Now, again, pointing out, children don't vote. They never have voted. I mean, there's some movement about trying to lower the voting age to 16, but certainly in the 80s and 90s, children didn't vote. So taking away children's voting rights would have no effect on this situation. However, parental authority is key. And in all these cases, what you'll find is the government was in charge of undermining parental authority. It was the government banning spanking. It was the government instituting studies and feeding the media this bullshit narrative that self-esteem was the most important thing in the world. It was the government launching investigations in California against daycare workers, empowering these children with all this bullshit statistics and these academics saying that all these children were being molested. No evidence needed. Just, all these children were being molested. And even if they deny it, they really were molested. Just, no matter what they say, they were molested. This was a combination of academics and government undermining parental authority. If you're being honest, the answer is restore parental authority. Restoring parental authority fixes this problem. Now, some parents, even if given authority, will spoil their children. There are people who are just bad parents. So tying this all back to gynocentrism and feminism, I've said this all along, that women are not the problem, the system is the problem. The children are not the problem in this scenario, like all these articles I've talked about. It's not that the children were bad, that the children were just inherently evil, and we needed to do something about these evil children. The problem is the system was corrupt because of a government that was trying to impose its values onto parents and undermining their authority. Ultimately, that is the problem. The problem isn't technology. The problem isn't a lack of religion and racism. The problem is the government getting into your family and undermining your authority, which is why I give credit to the president of the Philippines, who, again, according to this NPR article about these countries who are banning spanking, the Philippines tried to pass a law banning spanking and he vetoed it because he didn't want the government getting into the role of the family. He wanted to protect the sanctity of the family. That's the right call. Just as parents need authority over their children, men need authority over women for the exact same reason. And the government, unfortunately, has interceded into that dynamic, has forced itself into the quote-unquote bedrooms of families and individuals, and told men that they are not allowed to have authority over women. That is sexist, that is whatever, that's not progressive, that's not how we do things anymore. And as a consequence, you have spoiled feminist children, where men have no authority. You have witch hunts, known as Me Too, where men have no rights. The answer is not technology. The answer is not racism and Jesus. The answer, just as the president of the Philippines said, is to remove the government from these private matters and have the natural balance of parental authority over their children or men's authority over women be the standard. Anyway, that's about all I had to say. I think this is a pretty airtight case if you really think about it. But maybe you could find some problems with my reasoning. How the problem really is technology, or the answer really is racism and Jesus. I'd love to hear it. Anyway, this is Turd Flinging Monkey. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. This Christmas, TF Monkey invites you to rediscover the magic of the holidays with The Doll on My Balls. The heartwarming story of a man and his sex doll who's more than she appears. Enjoy this new holiday classic for children of all ages 18 and up. The Doll on My Balls. Available now on Amazon Kindle.
But wait, there's more. Check out the all-new sequel to the 2016 classic. The Doll on My Balls Rides Again is now available on Amazon Kindle. You can also get the paperback of The Doll on My Balls Rides Again, which also includes the original Doll on My Balls. All in one book, available for the first time in paperback. Give yourself the gift of these heartwarming holiday classics today.